The rain had just stopped when the funeral began, leaving the cemetery wrapped in a cold silver mist. People whispered beneath black umbrellas as the casket of Helena Witford, the only daughter of billionaire industrialist Charles Witford, was lowered toward its final place. The world believed Helena had died suddenly in her sleep, her parents shattered, her friends stunned. But just as the priest raised his hand to give the last blessing, a man in a worn neon green garbage collector's uniform stumbled forward, his boots sinking into the wet grass. His clothes were stained, his hands shaking, and his face pale with urgency. This was Mateo Reyes, the quiet street cleaner. No one ever noticed yet. In this moment, everyone froze as he pointed at the casket with trembling certainty. She's not dead. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. The mourners stiffened as Mateo stood. They're soaked in rain and fear, but driven by something deeper than pride or hesitation. He was not a man accustomed to speaking in front of wealthy crowds or powerful families. He lived in the shadows of a society that barely noticed him. Yet today, everything depended on him being heard. Helena's father glared at him with a mixture of disbelief and fury, but Mateo's gaze did not waver. He had spent years cleaning the same streets where Helena often walked her dog, where she smiled at him as if he were not invisible, where she paused to ask him about his day while others shielded their eyes. She was the only person who ever treated him like a human being, and he knew something about her condition that no one else seemed to notice. Mateo recounted the night he found Helena slumped on a park bench, pale but breathing faintly. He had called an ambulance, stayed by her side, and insisted the paramedics check her pulse twice because it was so shallow it nearly faded every few seconds. He remembered the medic mentioning a rare condition that caused temporary comas with almost undetectable signs of life. But somewhere between the hospital's rushed protocols and her family's shock, that information had been lost. When the doctor later announced her passing, Mateo had been pushed aside, told that he must be mistaken, told that he had no authority to question the hospital's judgment. But he never forgot how her fingers had moved when he held her hand that night, like a faint plea for someone to pay attention. Now standing before the open grave, he begged them to reconsider. His voice trembled, but grew stronger as he spoke from the heart, describing Helena's kindness toward people like him, describing how she once left warm meals beside the dumpsters for stray animals, and how she once defended him when a group of teenagers mocked his job. He told them he owed her everything, including the courage to interrupt this funeral. And as the mourners absorbed his every word, the silence grew heavier, not with anger, but with a creeping realization that perhaps this broken man in a dirty uniform saw something they did not. The priest signaled for the casket lid to be opened again, despite the objections of a few nervous relatives. Charles Witford, shaken by the depth of Mateo's conviction, nodded reluctantly. The lid rose slowly, revealing Helena's serene face, her auburn hair resting gently around her. Her mother covered her mouth, preparing herself for nothing more than another heartbreak. But Mateo stepped forward, staring closely. He urged them to place a small mirror beneath her nose. For a long, breath-holding moment, nothing happened. Then, so faintly it seemed like imagination, a tiny patch of fog touched the corner of the glass. Chaos erupted. Doctors were summoned from the funeral guests. A pulse was checked and though almost non-existent, it was there. Helena was rushed out of the cemetery in a blur of cries, running footsteps, and collapsing knees. Mateo stood frozen as the ambulance sped away, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with fragile hope that he might have saved her life. Hours later, in a stark hospital corridor, Charles found Mateo sitting alone on a metal bench, drenched and trembling. For the first time, the billionaire saw him not as a garbage collector, but as the man who had noticed what no expert did. Helena had slipped into a rare metabolic coma that mimicked death, and Mateo's intervention had prevented a nightmare no family could ever recover from. The weight of gratitude brought tears streaming down Charles's face. He sat beside Mateo, not above him, thanking him with a sincerity that could never be repaid with money. Days passed before Helena finally opened her eyes. The first thing she asked was why Mateo looked so worried. When they told her the truth, how close she had come to being buried alive, how Mateo had stood alone against a crowd, she wept and held his hands, promising that his life would never be ignored or overlooked again. Her survival became a moment that spread across the city, a symbolic reminder that dignity and humanity were not tied to wealth or status, but to courage, compassion, and the willingness to speak the truth even when no one listens. In the weeks that followed, Charles offered Matteo a new job, not out of charity, but out of respect. Matteo refused anything that elevated him unfairly, but accepted a position overseeing community outreach programs Helena wanted to build. Programs that fed the homeless, offered job training, and ensured people like Matteo were seen, heard, and valued. The once invisible garbage collector now stood at the heart of a mission that changed countless lives. If this story moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps keep these meaningful stories alive on Kindness Corner. Before you go, tell us in the comments what part of this story touched your heart the most. And so, the world learned that heroes don't always wear capes or expensive suits. Sometimes they wear torn gloves, stained jackets, and carry the quiet strength to shout the truth when the world refuses to see it. And because of one such hero, Helena lived and countless others found hope again.